Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. In the third section of the groundwork of the Metaphysics of Morals, Immanuel Kant engages in a discussion that's going to correlate something which is very famous from one of his other works, the first critique, the Critique of Pure Reason, namely the thing in itself, here spoken in terms of the plural, with the nature of the free human being. One of the things that he's been talking about is that even though we live in a universe that appears to be in many respects deterministic, we are nonetheless free in terms of our will and our capacity to choose morality and thereby to actually generate morality and to understand its principles. So how is this possible? So Kant is going to make this very important correlation between two different types of what he is calling Ursache, or you might say fundamental things, and in some of the cases of the translation, it's going to be translated as causes. These are to include the things in themselves, right? The Ding-in-sich, that are lying behind appearances, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But those are also including you might call it the free aspect, the intelligible aspect of the human being. And that's where it gets very interesting, because we are, as we're doing this with Kant, as we're following along, we are engaged in thinking about our own very nature. Now, Kant is going to frame this at the beginning of this discussion in terms of two different worlds. This is not a totally new concept, right? Plato himself had something like this. We'll see other philosophers actually trying to wed Kant and Plato later on. In any case, we have a world of sense, the things that impinge upon us. For example, you're watching this right now through your senses. You're hearing, you're seeing me walking around pointing at this chalkboard. Things are impinging upon your faculties of sense. And there's more than just you taking in sense data. Of course, you're associating it together into things that make some sort of sense in a different term. You're identifying me as a human being. You're seeing the words there on the chalkboard. There's all sorts of work of what Kant calls the understanding going on as well. There's also the intelligible world, the world of the understanding. This is not actually a world that the understanding itself is going to grasp as such. So it's a bit of a misnomer to call it the world of the understanding. But another way we can talk about it is the intelligible world, right? And the understanding is, as Kant says, a sort of spontaneity that brings together these things. The understanding itself is not totally on the side of sense, but is indeed formed, quite a bit in the way it works by what's going on this side. And two other words that we can use for these are phenomenal and noumenal. Why do we use these sorts of words? Well, they come from Greek, right? Phainomene means the things that appear. And noumena is the things that are intelligible, the things that we can understand, yet not necessarily see with our eyes. Although, perhaps if we want to be metaphorical, we can see them with the eyes of our mind or some other thing along those lines. So what lies on the side of the phenomenal world? So Kant tells us that the appearances and the knowledge that we have of these appearances pertains to the world of sense. What are the appearances? Again, my walking around here, you sitting in front of whatever thing you're viewing this on, whether it be a phone or a laptop or a television or who knows what. These videos may be viewed upon in the distant future. Some sort of hologram, something like that. That would all be within the world of appearances. What you're sitting on or standing on, that's all within the world of appearances. The sensations of your body, also within the realm of sense. What about the other side? Well, Kant says that behind the appearances, behind the phenomena, we have to assume that there's something else. And these themselves are not further phenomena or appearances, sort of like if we were just peeling back onions or something like that. They are the things in themselves to which the phenomena or appearances belong and from which they derive. And we can't ever sense these. We can't have knowledge in any strict sense of these, but we can, in fact, think of them. And now notice that Kant, I pointed this out, doesn't talk about just the thing in itself, but he talks about things in themselves, in the plural. So there is a multiplicity there behind the appearances. We don't know exactly which thing comes from what. Another thing that we should point out is on this side we can derive laws, right? We have all sorts of laws that pertain to the natural things. We call the inquiry into that science, and we can generate quite a bit of that. We can also, and here's where we start getting to the human being as such, we can come up with laws for how it is that insofar as we are phenomenal beings, our interactions with the world work, our consciousness is spurred, or as Kant will say, affected by the things of the world. So Kant goes on and he says, when you think about how you know yourself, a human being not only can know these things out there, but can't know the things in themselves. A human being can't even know him or herself in what they are entirely. That's an interesting idea, isn't it? He says, a person cannot pretend to know what that person is in himself or in herself from the knowledge he has or she has by internal sensation, inner sense, as well as external sense. Nor can we know what we are entirely by the appearances of our nature, the characteristics that we have, tendencies, our interests, our inclinations, our desires. All that stuff is us, but it's of the phenomenal world. Even how our consciousness is affected by, say, other human beings or by other things within the phenomenal world is on the side of the phenomenal world. And insofar as we're considering ourselves in that way, we're not really free. We are actually subject to, laws of nature. They may not be the same laws of nature like gravity or things like that. They may be much more complex. They could be, psychosocial laws, right? Or however we want to think about it. But there's going to be laws that govern that. On the other side, considered insofar as we are, a cause, literally a primordial thing, an Ursache, right? Kant will talk about our, what's translated as ego, our Ich in German, the real me behind the appearances. Insofar as I am that, I am actually free. And insofar as I am that, I am like the thing in itself. There is something that's me behind the appearances of the me that you're seeing right now and the me that I conceptualize when I think about, the guy that I happen to be and my memories and what I'm going to eat for dinner or any of those sorts of things. That is where the locus of human freedom lies. And Kant says that we can look at ourselves in both of these ways at the same time. We can look at ourselves as an effect and thereby part of this entire world of appearances, or we can look at ourselves as a cause. And insofar as we do so, we are regarding ourselves as beings that exist in this world of the understanding, beyond the appearances.